Think about the last time you were completely alone. No audience, no one watching, no version of yourself being performed for anyone. Now think about how rare that actually is. Because even when you're physically alone, the performance doesn't fully stop. You're composing the caption for the photo you haven't taken yet. You're pre-editing the story you'll tell later. You're monitoring how the version of you that exists in other people's minds is doing. Adjusting, managing, maintaining. We have built a world where the self is always, to some degree, on stage. And the cost of that is something most people feel deeply but rarely name. What the performance actually requires. Now, the boundary between private life and public presence has eroded in ways that have no real historical parallel. Social platforms don't just allow self-presentation, they structurally reward it. Visibility is currency. Consistency is credibility. And the pressure to maintain a coherent, appealing, legible persona across every digital surface has become a background condition of modern existence. What gets lost in that framing is how much labor it actually requires. Every social interaction online or off involves a translation process. You take what you're actually thinking, actually feeling, actually experiencing, and you run it through a filter. Is this safe to say? Is this the right tone? Is this consistent with how this person knows me? Will this land the way I intend? That process is largely invisible. Or it happens fast. But it is real cognitive work, and it happens dozens, sometimes hundreds of times a day. Psychologists describe this as the labor of impression management, and like all labor, it produces fatigue, not the physical kind that sleep resolves. A deeper kind, the fatigue of having spent the day being a slightly edited version of yourself. What repeated masking does over time? Here's where it gets more serious. The social filter, the gap between what you actually are and what you present, is manageable in small doses. Most people maintain it naturally, and most of the time it doesn't cost much. But when the filter is running constantly, when every interaction requires performance, and there are few spaces where performance isn't required, something begins to shift. The boundary between the mask and the face starts to blur. You start losing track of which reactions are genuinely yours and which ones have been calibrated for an audience. You perform enthusiasm you don't feel and suppress frustration that you do. So many times across so many contexts that the authentic response becomes harder to access than the performed one. Therapists who work with people experiencing this describe a very specific kind of identity fatigue, not depression, not anxiety in the clinical sense, but a hollowness, a sense of having been present all day without actually showing up, as they say, of having interacted with many people without being genuinely seen by any of them, and because the external life looks fine, functional, social, even active. There's rarely permission to name it as a problem. When isolation becomes the only real rest. For people running this level of social overhead, alone time stops being loneliness and starts being survival. Not because they dislike people, but because other people, even people they love, currently require a performance they don't have the energy to give. The danger of this state isn't the isolation itself. It's what the isolation signals. That social interaction has become so costly, so weighted with expectation and management, that genuine connection feels like a high-stakes task rather than a human pleasure. That's the breaking point worth paying attention to. Not when you need to rest after socializing. That's normal. But when the idea of being with people feels more like a threat than a comfort. what it looks like to stop performing. The path back isn't dramatic. It's not a decision to suddenly be radically honest in every context, or to abandon the social filters that serve a legitimate purpose. It's smaller than that. It's finding one space, one relationship, one environment where the performance isn't required, where you can say what you actually think without pre-editing, where getting it wrong doesn't carry social consequence, and letting that space exist regularly enough that your nervous system remembers what it feels like to simply be present rather than managed. It's also a shift in how you define social success. The goal doesn't have to be being perceived perfectly. It can be being perceived accurately. There is a significant difference, and the second one is actually achievable. Because the people worth being around aren't looking for a perfect performance. They're looking for a real person. And that person, unedited, unmanaged, genuinely present, is more compelling than anything you could design.